May the meditations of my heart, the words of my mouth, and the meditations of our hearts be acceptable in your sight. Amen. Please be seated. Okay, friends, when I was 14, I was a freshman in high school, and the world weighed really heavily on my shoulders. Could I move up from alternate to full member of the drill team when tryouts happened in April? Could I manage my 18-year-old boyfriend? Yes, 18. Could I keep my father off my back with his daily complaints about the length of my skirts? Because it was 1972 and anybody with any fashion sense knew that the proper hem length was where your thumbs meet your thighs, right? And could I maintain my second-tier slot in the high school jungle? Friends, enemies, frenemies, they all had places in my ruminations. The truth is, I was a middle-class kid in a safe community in a free country. I went to the Catholic Church on my street, sang in the choir with that boyfriend, and recited my Hail Marys while living in complete ignorance of my peer behind the prayer. Mary's life wasn't like mine by a mile. In first century Nazareth, you see, female children were betrothed for marriage almost as soon as their first periods. So age 14 is a pretty reasonable guess for the age of the girl we meet in today's gospel. Mary wasn't a woman. She was barely a teenager. And the fact that she even made it to 14 was kind of a miracle, because half of everybody born in those days died in childhood. That's why marriage was young, arranged, and inescapable for your average Jewish girl. Her destiny was to get married, try to populate her community by having kids until she just couldn't do it anymore, or she died. It was also a community where life for everybody was ruled by a stultifying social code. For instance, if a Gentile's shadow fell over your food, it was contaminated. If you carelessly made an oath or let your hair get ratty, touched the carcass of an insect with 4 unjointed legs, or plowed to the edges of your field, you were in trouble. Almost every hour of every day, your life was ruled by the law of Leviticus, and honor was absolutely everything. Mary lived in a village where shame and honor made the world go round. Women accrued honor by being modest, chaste, and keeping the home fires burning. Men through acts of courage or generosity and the recognition of their communities. This was important to it's actually really important for us to grasp, because little Mary had been giving the worst possible piece of news by God's angel. And a visit by an angel would not have been as shocking to her as it would be to us, because magic, myth, demons, angels, medicine, faith, it was all one mystical stew back in ancient times. People saw angels and demons all the time. You see, she was betrothed. That's legally binding marriage, phase 1. Phase 1 allowed that groom, who was usually older, to prepare a home and the bride to grow up just a little bit more. After 1 year, the groom would pay a bride price, pick her up, move her to his house, and they would start making that family. To get pregnant during this first phase of marriage, when she's still living with her parents, would have been a devastating honor violation, punishable by anything from a humiliating public trial to public capital punishment, death by stoning. Now, the Romans had really liberal policies toward marriage, divorce, living together, they didn't much care. So they didn't really authorize that dramatic punishment very often. But what happened all the time is that the girl would be divorced by her groom, kicked out of her father's home, and ostracized by the community to beg, starve, do whatever. She was forever denied a path back to the only safety a female had in those days, and that was marriage. So from the perspective of her culture, Mary should have been bargaining, pleading, yelling, and generally telling that angel to take it elsewhere, because he was going to ruin her life, right? Let's pause there and take a look at the author of this story. If we read what Luke gives his activist Mary to say in today's gospel, we kind of see other political ideas that don't really reflect reality. He has brought the powerful down from their thrones. Well, Palestine at that time and up until World War I was under occupation of one sort or another, so that's not true. He has lifted the lowly. Actually, 80% of her community, of her country, was a serfdom in subjugation to an aristocracy. He has filled the hungry with good things. Well, 90% of her community was living at a subsistence level, fending off starvation on any given day. So it kind of looks, to me at least, like today's whole passage is in direct opposition to likely facts. I had to sit with this for a couple of days to think of something to say about it. So here's what I got, and later you can tell me what you think. Let's start our analysis with the author, because we don't actually really know what Mary did or didn't say. There was a 2-generation gap between this story and Mark, the first gospel. Luke, as my Bible study friends know, wrote the 3rd gospel, and he's the only author of the 4 to include this story. He was probably a 2nd or 3rd generation Christian, maybe a Gentile convert based on the language he uses in his book. So maybe he wrote this around 80 or 90 years after Jesus was born, because people didn't live as long as they do now. Things were really hard for Christian believers in Luke's days. They were brutally persecuted by the Romans, partly because of their intolerance of other religions, and definitely due to their failure to worship the Roman emperor, which was a requirement of every subject. They were also increasingly being ostracized from Jewish worship communities, those Christians who were also Jews, because the theological differences in these two faiths were just growing by the year. And all that pressure from outside and from inside caused a lot of infighting in the community, up to and including members turning each other over to the authorities for execution. So in the middle of all that chaos, here's Luke using the past tense to claim for the future things that God hasn't even done in the present. It's classic Old Testament expression of hope, claiming things for the present that God hasn't even done. So whether we're talking about Luke's community with their backs to the wall, so to speak, around 85 CE, or young Mary, same situation, different reason, around 3 CE, nobody here is letting their actual circumstances dictate their reactions. They are unknowingly practicing one of 2025's hottest ideas, the let them theory. Green book. Many of you probably own it. The let them theory comes from self-help guru Mel Robbins, and here's the gist of it. All human beings have a hardwired need for control. It makes us feel safe, But the fact is that we're never going to control other people. The only person you can control, maybe, is you. Your thoughts, your actions, your feelings. Most of our stress comes from fighting to change people or situations that aren't inside of our control. So let them. Let them do whatever they're going to do. And you focus on you. Your reactions, your responses. You're responding to the world thoughtfully, with good boundaries, taking care of yourself, being kind. You give yourself power and peace. You rise above your circumstances. I'm going to add something else that Luke and Mary were obviously practicing. Let God. All of us have had some experience of God, or you'd be at Sunday brunch. We've all seen God work in our lives, getting us through, opening doors, getting us out of situations we had no reason to think we could get out of, coming up with surprise solutions to irresolvable problems. Luke and Mary were just letting the world do what it was going to do without getting stressed out or hopeless, focusing on the things they could do and letting God do the rest. Here's how that might have looked. Here's Mary. Despite how much trouble I'm in, the Mighty One has done great things for me. Let me respond with gratitude, say yes, and do the next responsible action, because even though this looks like a really, really bad idea, I'm going to trust that God will somehow work it out. Here's the man who gave her a voice, Luke, writing to a friend. Instead of panicking with, "Hey, Theophilus, Christianity is a dumpster fire and you should get far, far away," he wrote, "I have decided to write an orderly account for you, most excellent Theophilus, so that you may know the truth about the things you have been taught. Because this is an action I am capable of, and I trust that God will somehow work this out." What does this mean for us? I think it's this. Time is short. Let's focus on what we can control and leave the rest. To paraphrase a line in Psalm 39, God has given us all a mere handful of days. So let them. Let me. Let God. Despite how it may look in your life right now, you are not your circumstances. Truly, your life and the possibilities in it are so much bigger than that. Despite her rigid culture, Mary turned out to actually be blessed among all women, with a great, extraordinary amount of honor. And despite Roman persecution, the Jesus movement actually went on to thrive, and Luke became famous. The rearview mirror doesn't lie, my friends, so look back on your own life and wonder at all the many beautiful times you were saved. With God, all things are possible. And that's the reason we can let go of the things we can't control, choose our responses from a place of wisdom, and give the rest to the divine. So hail, young Mary, full of grace. You're going to be okay. It'll all work out. And thank you for showing us a life-altering truth that's going to free us from worry and give us wings. Amen.